Hi everyone, I'm Adam Davis, Director of Product here at Productboard, and also our Product Makers Community Lead. I'm very excited to be having this fireside chat today with Donna Lichaw. I think I said that right.
Very close, very close. Yeah, I'm turning my ringer off so that, okay.
Awesome.
Okay.
So Donna is an executive coach, keynote speaker, and best-selling author of The Leader's Journey and the much-awaited follow-up to The User's Journey. So she helps high-growth CEOs and executives and senior leadership teams transform their leadership to propel their business forward more effectively and provide tools, exercises, and courses to help you transform your leadership so that you can accomplish the extraordinary. And I will say personally, the tools that you discuss in the book are really helpful. I was just mentioning to Donna beforehand, but I've actually started one of the exercises of backcasting a year from now. And for the audience, if you haven't had a chance to read the book or if you had even heard about it before, it's about kind of imagining yourself in the future and then articulating what you accomplished over a certain period of time to help you figure out your plan to get there. So I found it super helpful. And I was actually thinking about it today on my dog walk. So I'm very excited to be able to speak with you today and for us to dive into some of the great learnings and insights from this book for our audience as well. And just before we kick off, Donna, for our audience, if you do have any questions, please drop them in our Q&A section of Zoom or also just in the Zoom chat. And for our LinkedIn live audience, please drop it in the comments and our team will pass it through to us. And I'll be selecting a couple of those at the end. So we'll leave about 15 to 10 minutes or so for a bit of a Q&A. We also have 25 books up for grabs to those that ask questions and engage, and our team will be keeping track and reaching out to those who were selected. So it's a really awesome opportunity to grab yourself the book as well. All right, so to kick off, I'd love to know a little bit about how your summer's been, Donna. Any particular highlights for you?
It's been good. I guess a highlight for me, I took my family a week or two ago to Cape Cod for vacation. And one of my favorite things is lobster. And my 4-year-old in preschool yesterday was, they had a painting session where they did art and he drew on an easel and we got a video of him describing it. Looked like complete gibberish, but it was so cute when his teacher asked, "What is this?" His answer was lobster. I got a lobster stuffy and lobster. This is my vacation with my family. And it was so cute. So yeah, I love it when I do fun things with people, including work and clients, and they reflect it back in wonderful little vignettes. So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
It was fun.
That's a great highlight. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Well, to kick into it, I do want to start by saying first that the book was really fascinating. Like, I think it actually came at a really good time for me personally in terms of reading it. And it's filled with so many interesting bits of information and a really wonderful kind of storytelling structure with some great examples throughout. I think you may have touched on that a little bit there in terms of art and creating things in story, but what inspired you to write the book?
So what inspired me to write the book were a few things. One, actually, I guess I'll backtrack first. What inspired me to start working with executives on their leadership and not on products was I have a product background, decades working in software and web. And when I was working with folks at more and more successful companies, higher and higher up in leadership as a product strategy consultant, I would often come in and help them with what my consulting business was doing for years and what my last book was on, which is thinking about their customers as heroes of their own stories and crafting products and services that fit within a journey that your customers want to take with you. And I would come in and work with these really successful executives, and over and over again, they would be either blunt, or it would be clear that they didn't have product problems, they had people problems. And so I shifted my practice from product strategy and product consulting to leadership development and executive coaching. And over time, the work that I was doing with my clients was so successful, to the point that, one, I mostly work with CEOs and executive level leaders now to help them be better leaders of entire companies. But two, or if it's like a large, giant multinational corporation, it might be you're the head of an entire org at a company, which is like the size of another company. But it shifted how I worked. It was so successful that as I started working with more and more senior executives in a coaching capacity, I found myself wanting to share the work we were doing with more people, because I believe that desire and capacity to lead and be a great leader is something that starts early on in people's careers, and is something you often want to do early on. And I want more people to have an impact. And I can't work one-on-one as a coach with everybody, but a book is something anyone can buy. So at some point, just things were working so well with my clients that I wanted to be able to share that with more people and help more people transform themselves and transform their organizations. So that's yeah, that's what forced me to do it. I don't even like writing, but I had to do it.
I'm really curious, how long does it take to like write a book and go through that whole process and publish it? Must be quite a long process.
So the funny thing, and this was the case with my last book too, the writing of a book, if you're focused on it, which I can't multitask very well. So I work really effectively if I focus on one thing, like one project at a time. And so while I worked on both books, I think the writing part only took a few months. But it's the editing part. It's the pre-work before you write, of figuring out what is this book about and how am I going to either pitch it to a publisher, or figure out the outline of what I'm going to go write. That's hard, but it's the rewriting and the editing that sucks. It's like torture. So I think end to end, both my books were about a year long for each project. But yeah, the writing is easy because you can write garbage.
Yeah,
And then you get to write a very crappy first draft, and then you got to go fix it.
Yeah, awesome. It's like shipping that first MVP, and then you gotta
Oh yeah,
run it.
yeah. You just got to create something with the good bones that works, and then you have to make it better.
Yeah, awesome. So I think one of the things you touched on, and one of the things I was kind of amazed as reading through it, is just some of the folks you've been able to work with are incredible. Like these top executives, real senior leaders working at some of the top companies in the world. And it seems like it's a really great toolkit to help leaders work through kind of self-doubt and insecurities. And one thing I was super curious about is that a common pattern, or are most leaders you work with like this kind of confident individual of kind of their place in the company and their capabilities as leaders? Is that common, or do you kind of see the other side of it as well?
Yeah, confidence is a very common, I'll call it a paradox in senior leadership, because I find there are two types of senior leadership. So there's the type, if you in the corporate world, where there are more paths to becoming an executive, and you might have had management training and you had a great manager and you moved on up, and there are all these paths and systems that are set up in corporate that exist. I don't work with a lot of those executives. They all work with coaches. So part of the path is they all have coaches to work with. The HR is very systematized at those large corporations, and so you don't become an executive without working with a coach. But in the tech world, which is where I come from, and all of my clients come from, even if they're nonprofits, they still have some type of tech background or doing something tech related. The world I come from, there are no traditional paths towards leadership. We've all made it up. most of us and all of my clients have either created their company from scratch, or they created their org from scratch, or their role from scratch. They're the first person to be running product at a $1 billion scale up, and that's a big that's a big deal. And so
Mhm.
um, there, yeah, there's a lot of insecurity that happens because you're making it all up, and it's hard. You're good, you can make things up, but it's hard to feel confident in that on the one hand. On the other hand, it's also a paradox where most people in this type of senior leadership who have paved their own paths, to do that on the outside, they often seem confident, and they seem maybe overly confident. And that creates problems as well, because on the inside, they're so insecure. On the outside, they bulldoze, they don't listen to people, they micromanage, they can't let go of little details because they still often have that individual contributor mindset that they probably came from.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of insecurity, but you don't always see it on the outside. What you see are frustrated teams, or goals changing every day, or just lack of focus. So yes, it's there.
Yeah.
It's there.
And I think you speak, I think it's the case study of Greg, if I'm not mistaken. So one of the case studies where you speak about Greg's experience leading a team and some of the challenges that he has. And I think some of those examples in terms of either perhaps the confidence isn't there, or perhaps he doesn't feel like he has the right skill set, or he's not getting the support from senior leadership. And some of those different kind of examples you pointed to in terms of goal changing, or I don't know, perhaps the individual thinking they know exactly what's right, not listening to people. So I think you really kind of speak to some of those really great case studies, and then you unpack how to actually start solving it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the way insecurities play out in those situations is you become very reactive. And I'll make a product analogy. I mean, so I have a product background, and I know um, the best product leaders I've worked with are confident in what they're trying to learn or what they're trying to build. Ideally, you're always trying to learn. Um, the worst product leaders I've worked with are the ones who are just reactive to every little thing. Oh my God, a customer said this, and we have to change this, and the CEO wants this. And CEOs I've worked with, again, same thing, especially founder CEOs, confident in what they want to learn, what they want to build, or they're reactive to everything. And the reactiveness creates problems from a business perspective. It's almost always because of insecurity and lack of clarity and lack of vision and all these other things that typically come from within.
Mm-hmm.
First. Very, very common.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. One thing I'd love to touch on a little bit is around kind of the power of storytelling. So you've got a very interesting career history. You've worked as a product leader, consultant, and you've seen that some of the biggest problems are actually the people problems, as you mentioned at the beginning. And you wrote that great book, A User's Journey, that really dove into how, when, and why to use narratives to kind of engage with customers, teams, and other stakeholders. So I'd love to know a little bit more about how stories have shaped your learning, your development, and your kind of career transformation.
So the biggest thing I've learned, so I have a filmmaking background. Before working in tech, I was a documentary filmmaker. And what I learned was the art of turning reality into stories in order to convey something, to teach something, to explain something, or to move people to action. And I think, as someone who worked at a lot of successful companies at different stages, what I started to see is that the companies and the products that were the least successful were the ones that it wasn't about anyone telling stories, but it was about the product having a story to it.
Mm.
And it was about me understanding the product. Okay, this iPhone, It is magic. It
Mm-hmm.
works like magic. It's the best way to communicate. Cool. 15 years ago, this could have been an an iPod that also made phone calls. That's all I was expecting, and that's all anyone was expecting. But instead, it was a new way to communicate with the world around you. On the one hand, you could say, well, that's a great story, and yes, Steve Jobs gave wonderful keynotes and all of that. And yes, that's a part of it. But what he was able to do is build a product that conveyed that. It didn't tell a story. iPhone's not telling me to buy it,
Mm-hmm.
but or 15 years ago, it wasn't telling me to buy it, but it was something that when people picked it up, I remember this being the case with my dad, who like could barely use a VCR in the old days. I don't even think figured out DVD players, but I remember he picked up the phone, he started fiddling with it, and he said, "This is like magic." And he was a huge Star Trek fan, so he was really excited about like, oh my god, it's
Yeah.
like really like magic. Like I remember this from Star Trek. Yes, that's the story Steve Jobs told, but my dad never heard that story. He just picked it up and was like, wow. So the best stories are ones that people experience, because we are all, storytelling is not just something we do to people, it's how we understand the world around us. And there's a lot of science behind that. I go into all that in my books. But leadership is much the same, which is, a lot of people, especially in the product world, are obsessed with this idea of, oh, one of the top things you need to do to be a great product leader is to tell stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I call bullshit. I hope it's all right if I
That's
curse
all
on this, but uh, it's not true. If anything, and I think this is one of the stories in the book. I've worked with people who come to me and they say, "Oh my God, my team." They keep saying, "Stop it with the storytelling. What am I doing? What am
Mm-hmm.
I doing wrong?" As a great product leader, you're not telling stories. It's a tiny piece of what you do. It's going to come up. You're going to have to give pitches, demos. That's going to happen. But you are the story. You're enabling people to have an experience
Mm-hmm.
with you. And if that experience is magical enough or productive enough or whatever it is that you're all about, they're going to tell your story for you. If it's
Mm-hmm.
crappy, they'll tell that story for you as well, and that's not ideal as well. So stories, I almost call the book Against Storytelling, because I'm so sick of everyone saying as leaders need to be great storytellers. No, you don't. You need to see stories in everything you do,
Mm-hmm.
in how you think, in how you operate, and how everyone else experiences you. You need to check those stories when it's ones that are in your head, like I'm a failure, or no one listens to me, like they're probably not true. So you need to figure out what the true stories are, and you need to assess those stories with everyone you work with so that you know how they're experiencing you, what impact you're really having, and what impact you can have on your business and on the world. So yeah, down with storytelling. You are the story.
I love that. No, you're spot on, because I think one of the key things we talk a lot about in product management is, as you pointed out, was as you become a product leader, it's all about storytelling, and that's really kind of battered into folks. But I think you really touched on a great point there, which storytelling is how the person experiences it, and as a leader, assessing what impact you're having and following through with it. One thing I always like to talk about is being a product leader is you don't just get it one day and it's a check mark. It's about turning up every single day and being that leader and assessing that impact. So that certainly resonates a lot. But maybe we could write a blog post on what was the title? Don't storytell? No.
Against storytelling, down with storytelling.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. A follow up to that, I'm really curious on your perspective on it. So, a lot of leaders and a lot of product makers at all disciplines are facing a lot of like challenging times at the moment. So, macroeconomically, professionally, and perhaps some folks weren't as crisp in the past in terms of storytelling in any way. Kind of those different ways you were thinking about it or talking about it. How do you view storytelling now? And is it more important than ever, or should folks be thinking about it differently? How would you kind of view that?
I think it's the same, which is you're not, as a leader, you're doing it wrong if you're just trying to convince everyone about something.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing it right if you understand who you are as a leader, the impact you want to make, where you're taking people, and what's in the way. That's a story. That's your story. If you know that, you are aligning your beliefs, mindset, actions accordingly. When you do that, you then amplify it outwards. So you bring your team along that journey with you. So you not only have to understand that for yourself, you have to understand what their dreams, goals, desires, superpowers, kryptonite are one on one, individually.
Mm-hmm.
Each person you ever interact with, you have to know what that is, and you have to help them and them collectively bring that best story to life. If
Mm-hmm.
it means telling a story occasionally, sure, great. Probably that is not what happens. It means asking great questions and really listening to people. It also works on a team level. So you need to know, that'll be my next book, once I have time for for that, which is your team as a system has dreams, goals, desires, impact it needs to make, wants to make, superpowers, kryptonite. All of that works on a systems level for your team, as well as all the other teams you work with. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, oh, that they'll never go for it, talking about another team. Like, is that true? Is it not? Oh, engineering is a pain. Is that true? What's true? Oh, every time you come to engineering with a half-baked idea and say we needed it yesterday, they fight, they push back. Okay. So how do you rewrite that story? Because that sucks. And is it telling better stories? Probably not. Is it including them and getting buy-in early on? Probably. So it's the same thing in times of conflict and struggle. It's the same thing. You always have to think back, like lean back, take a big picture view of what's really going on. Where am I taking myself? What's in the way? Where do other people need to go? What's in the way? And how do we all align together? No one wants to hear your stories.
No, I think you raised some really good points there. And one particular part in the book that I really loved, I think we could probably talk the whole time about this, so I'll stop after this, was about understanding which narratives are true or not. Like I've certainly experienced that before, where you feel like there's a narrative around, I don't know, perhaps an individual or a project or a business unit or a team, and it's just not. And it's about, as you said, asking the right questions, involving the right folks, to be able to kind of get to that right outcome. One, I guess a follow up to that. So we've spoken quite a lot about kind of leadership and the telling the right stories. One thing I found super interesting was you spoke at the start of the book about the importance of finding your courage and your cape to get started with your identity narrative. And I guess for those that aren't good at self-reflection, what's the best approach to kind of unpack these stories? And I think it would also be helpful to kind of explain what identity narrative means and why that's important as well.
Yeah, so one of the things that most gets in the way of being an impactful leader is having these hidden unconscious stories pulling you back. And they show up as things like, I'm a failure, or I'm too quiet, or I'm this, I'm that. And anytime you do that, it's so unconscious and so automatic for most of us that you don't notice you're doing it, and you jump right to feeling something. So you feel guilt, shame, anger, anything. It also shows up as stories about other people and teams of people that you personify as one. Like I heard one from a CEO I work with the other day. It sounded something like, they all think I don't know what I'm doing. Like, what? So you have to check it. But it's real. I mean, I felt that way, I'm sure many of us have. They think I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So when we tell ourselves stories like that, we have to notice the emotion that comes up, because that emotion drives us to take some kind of action very quickly, and often it's the wrong action. So we snap at people, we fight, or we shrink back, or we just do things that are not helping move anyone forward. So you have to notice when you're having a strong emotion at work, in life in general too. You have to just kind of backtrack and see, all right, what's the story behind that, because probably there's a story there that's um, not true. If it was, there's a lion in front of me and it's about to eat me, okay, that's a good story to have. I don't care if it's true or not. Run, or hide. And that's where that ability for our brain to think in stories comes from. I mean, literally, it has been an evolutionary feature that keeps us alive. It's just that in the workplace, it ends up being a bug that holds us back a lot of the time. And so yeah, first thing you need to do is just notice the stories when they happen, and then slow down and try to find out what the real story is. And for that, um i I think in terms of facts, feelings, and fiction. So fact, all right, I'm really anxious right now. Fact, they stopped talking during our meeting and started looking at the wall and crossed their arms. Okay. Fiction, they hate me. Is it true? I don't know. So then you just put your product hat on. And I say product hat because I have that product background. If I were talking to a group of marketing folks right now, or a group of engineers, I would probably use some other term, but just find out what the real story is. Use your brain. How can you find out? You can ask someone. You can, if it's yourself, I have exercises in the book that will help this. You can go through your past and see, all right, I'm convinced I never get anything right. All right, well, go through your past, and what stories can you pull out of that? Is that true that you never get anything right? What have you gotten right? So you can, yeah, there's so many ways to uncover who you are. But the trick is to understand when you're not feeling great, that you're painting your identity in real time. It's called narrative parsing. In real time, you're creating this identity for yourself that's probably not true a lot of the time. And you just got to find out what the real story is, and then make it even better.
Yeah, no, it's amazing advice. Like, I think the different exercises, and I'm doing one for those that join a little bit later. I'm backcasting, so I'm kind of looking. I'm setting a goal for the next year and kind of reviewing how I'm going to get there. And there's some really good techniques shared in the book in terms of how to get there. But I think for those that, and I've been through this before, like if you're not dealing with it properly and you're not going through the steps to identify why you're feeling a certain way, it can have a massive impact on you in terms of your motivation to go to work, wanting to work with teams. So it's definitely in your best interest to kind of go through those steps and try and identify it, so you can figure out how you can be your best self really at work as well.
It's huge. And when you can figure that out for yourself, I mean, one, especially the more senior you are in leadership, working at the executive level and the C-suite level with folks, I can tell you, I mean, I have the data to back it up, this huge business impact to have this stuff get in the way. There's also the flip side of, when you figure out how to do it for yourself, you can also help others do it, because 9 out of 10, the biggest challenges you have managing others on your team or collaborating with others across your organization, or externally, is those stories that you're telling yourself about them and that they're telling themselves about you. And when you can help others unpack that, and you can collaboratively unpack that together, and then do that for your team as well, and more broadly for your company even, it's a huge game changer, because it's almost like we're all just a jumble of neurons at work, and we're all toddlers in a way, reacting to things. Even the best of us, I mean, I do it all the time as well. So yeah, you got to just check it and slow down. It's a great irony of everyone I work with. In slowing down, they end up moving faster, because moving more effectively in the end, and faster.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, kind of speaking of going faster, like earlier in your book, you touch on the value of finding and understanding your superpowers. So like what kickstarts you, calls you to action, motivates you to keep going, and then how those can be used to address challenges, and then allowing and encouraging to use these strengths. And you also talk about being aware of your kryptonite, which I love. This is a great term from it. So something that weakens us or leads us to failure. So as an example, like a personal behavior or characteristic that acutely kind of weakens you and everyone around you, or gets you into trouble, or causes problems for you. And I guess in your work with leaders, is there one side that is often the least understood? And if so, why?
One side of kryptonite versus superpowers.
Yeah, I guess for leaders that you're working with, and I think perhaps it'll be interesting for folks on listening in as well, like, are the leaders that you're working with, do they generally have a better understanding of their superpowers or their kryptonite?
It's a good question. So I think often when you're super senior in leadership, especially if you founded a company, you're deluded about both. And I say this again, it happens to the best of us. The things you think you're great at are not necessarily what other people see. And so, like, I'm working with someone who, you know, her ability to generate ideas is one of her superpowers. Yet the ability to generate ideas when you're the CEO of a company can be very annoying to people, when you're constantly, every idea you have, your executive team thinks they need to react to, and then the whole company shifts, and it's like infuriating. And so yes, it's a superpower, but it's one that has to be kept in check. And so a lot of times you don't, until you, and I'll use the product metaphor, until you get out of the building and start to, I consider it a customer development initiative in essence, until you find out what is most valuable to your users, your people, your team. You don't realize the impact you're having. On the flip side, I see most folks I work with come to me convinced that that their kryptonite is not, their kryptonite is something they need to fix.
Mm-hmm.
And it's often something, when you're in senior leadership, not something you need to fix, but something you just need to outsource. And so, example, I work with a lot of CEOs who are convinced that they need to be better project managers and managers and do better strategy. And the thing is, at that level, you need to be the ideas person. You need to be doing what your company needs, which is bringing the vision for the future, getting everyone excited about that, finding out how everyone's doing, liaising externally with the world, raising money, making money, all these things. The nitty gritty, I mean, often you need a really great COO, or same thing again internally. You created a new organization at a corporation, and you're running a large organization that's very messy. You don't need to necessarily do all the nitty gritty.
Mm-hmm.
You could try to learn it, but you have better things to do. You are the chief product officer. You need to be the visionary for your product organization. So maybe you need a great chief of staff, or, a great ops person, or whatever. It has a million different names and it changes all the time. But yeah, I think the to both, people are often deluded about their superpowers and how valuable they are in certain contexts. And then kryptonite, they often think that they have to learn to do things that they really don't need to be spending their time doing. And they often think, the other number two for kryptonite that is always wrong, is people are always convinced that the problem is other people.
Right. Yeah.
They don't know what they're doing. They are not dedicated. They blah, blah, blah. And 9 out of 10, the problem is you first.
Yeah, I think that's a good reminder. Like one thing I've struggled with this certainly, and I know a lot of folks do, is just we're so thin on time and we're just pulled in
Yeah.
so many different directions. So in the book, there's a real great part, as I mentioned, kind of talking about the power of backcasting. So writing your story, making it happen. And there's a ton of great content in here in terms of finding your vision, self-distancing, setting a mission, putting in place actions, and then evaluating what could go wrong. So essentially putting those steps in place in terms of how to be successful. But when everyone's so busy, how can leaders make sure to actually take the time to do that? And then I guess start to communicate and inspire that kind of future where they want to get to and these behaviors that they want to change.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I think, I hate to say it, but it's one of the reasons why I moved into executive coaching, because so I mean, it's a not so hidden secret, but at the executive level, the best folks out there have a coach. And you don't work with a coach because you're broken. You work with a coach because you want to get even better. And the analogy I always like to think of, well, I think of Serena Williams, but I could say I might change that to Coco Gauff now. But you don't work with a coach because you suck at tennis. You work with a coach because you're really good, and you cannot achieve your dream on your own. You want to be the greatest of all time or whatever that is. Very few elite athletes do that on their own. You need that focus and that container that a great coach can provide you, and those reminders of what it is you're trying to achieve. And so once you're senior enough and able to get that from work, take it. Take it, or ask for it. And I think it's because, like you said, it's just hard to carve out the time and do this stuff alone. If you're starting out and more new to management, and let's say a first-time manager, or even up to VP at a lot of companies, like, you just don't get coaches. There isn't always the return on the investment for a company to support you yet in that way, depending on the size of your company. And so there's a big movement to be a coach, as a manager, as a coach. And so to learn to do this for your team, and to have your manager do this kind of thing for you. And I think that is a wonderful way to help your development and others, so that you can create a greater impact at work. And so great managers have one-on-ones. Great managers don't just have goal systems that HR is making them, check boxes and do, but they ask people everything that's in the book. It's a year from now. What's amazing? Tell me. All right, what's in the way? What do we need to do to get there? And like a great coach, you put it on the other person to do it. You don't do it for them. So at the same time, for yourself, you can get that from your manager if they learn how to manage like a coach. When if that's really not possible, you can always go hire a coach on your own. There are plenty of folks who work with new managers, for example. But I find it's most impactful when you can get that from your work system, because then it's more likely to happen. You've got buy-in. Your boss is excited about your vision. You're not fighting them all the time about it. So it has to happen or organically. At the super senior level, you are very much alone. So I'll help you with that. At that point, you want to bring someone in external. CEO is too busy to coach you. And if you are the CEO, you have no one to coach you.
no time. No, that's a great piece of advice. I'm going to ask you one last question because we've actually got quite a few Q&A from the audience, so it'd be awesome to turn over to them. And it kind of builds on what you were speaking about then. So you touched on like the importance of leading others to greatness in the book, turning them into heroes and being curious, vulnerable, and open to collaboration. I'd love your thoughts on how can leaders, and also those probably earlier on in their career as well, best create the space and culture to like encourage each other towards success. So I'd love your thoughts on, for like a PM perhaps, or a product manager, or someone that, I know, perhaps starting off in their leadership career versus maybe a more seasoned leader.
Think like a product person. Everyone you work with, everyone you engage with is a customer.
Mm-hmm.
What are their dreams? What are their goals? What's in the way? How can you help them? If you do that in a way that's exciting and powerful to you, that honors the impact you want to make, that's your story, and impacts the superpowers that you can offer, it's magical. So you all know how to do this.
Yeah. Awesome.
Got to talk to people. Talk to people.
Yeah, love it. You can't beat just building good relationships, right? And asking people good questions.
And it's all relationships. That's how work gets done. That's how work gets done. And that's the great mission that you all are on in terms of, finding out customers, what the relationship could be with the business. It's the same thing. Same thing.
Awesome. Love it. All right. We're going to turn over to a bit of an open Q&A. Donna, thanks for fielding those questions from me. Now we're going to turn over to our audience. We've got one from our LinkedIn Live, which I really liked. And it was really interested in how team members can help leaders avoid that reactive trap. So we spoke a little bit about that before. Do you have any advice for how team members can help their leaders stop being so reactive?
Let's see. So this is how to have your boss stop being as reactive. Send them to work with me. I mean, I think that's, yeah, if the company is investing in their leadership, they shouldn't be as reactive. There's always an emotional component to what's going on, or that that culture is set. It's set from the top, honestly. And this is why I work mostly with CEOs and super senior executives now, because it's very hard to change culture from down here when culture is set up on top. So if that CEO is extremely reactive, the executive team is reactive, and then all teams below them are reactive, and they're just responding to that. So, normally I believe a lot of things can be done from managing without authority and leading without authority. You could try to coach any managers above you and find out what emotional things are causing them to react. But honestly, I see it usually as a cultural challenge. So try to become friends with them and help them unpack what's going on with them, but you know that you might be fighting culture, and that is set up on top. So I don't know if it's probably not the answer you wanted to hear.
No, I think it's a really good question. I've been in that situation before, and it's not easy. And yeah, I would echo your advice in terms of building that relationship, trying to do nudges, trying to do what you can, and ultimately, if you feel like it's not the right place for you, well, you can kind of make your own decisions.
Yeah. And I do have I think it's chapter 8 in the book on managing conflict, and it is the case study in the book is someone who's leading with authority over, so it's someone they manage that they're having conflict with. You can still, I recommend reading that chapter and seeing also what could come out of that. You can still do that with someone who manages you or someone senior outside of your org, but it's a lot harder to do.
Yeah, good luck to the person who asked that question. We
Yeah.
do, we have a couple of questions on the Zoom chat as well. So we got one from Jen, which is a really good one actually. What are the biggest hurdles that you see leaders having to overcome when they go from IC to a people leader?
Oh yeah, it's a great question. I think, and it's funny because the clients who I work with, when whether it's founders, CEOs, or founders of orgs at corporations, um, they all have that problem as well. So new managers, but also these folks, because they've catapulted into some type of senior leadership position, probably because they were an amazing, brilliant IC. And most founders I work with have either usually product background, um, often engineering, sometimes design, but usually product or engineering. And it's yeah, the hardest thing is what got you here won't get you there.
Mhm.
Being a great product person, great engineer, it means that you're probably great at details. You're probably also great at big picture stuff, but you're very tied to details all being executed exactly right. You're um whatever. I mean, everyone has their different superpowers, different strengths, but it at the point that you are, especially an executive, you have to be floating up here. Your job is to bring the vision, the excitement, the curiosity, the connection, to be creating relationships with everyone. It's not to be sitting in wireframe reviews or spreadsheets or little nitty gritty things. To a certain degree, I always think about someone like Steve Jobs. He would be very involved in tiny little animation, for example, tiny little features. So it's not that you can't do it at that level, but if that's what's happening, you have to have an amazing relationship with your team. I know folks who have worked with him who would give up their lives for him because they had such a great relationship. So when he would come and do the amazing executive poop and swoop, which I think it has other names too, seagulling, I've heard, but he would come in and annoy people. If they had a great relationship, they dealt with it. If they didn't know him, often people would leave his office crying or leave meetings with him like terrorized, and it was absolutely awful. So you have to know who your audience is there. But being a great IC means you were great at certain skills. You have to learn how to float at a certain level. But I think the trick and the thing that a lot of people forget about is a lot of people, when they come to me, they want to like completely shed their IC identity and like, yes, I'm a CEO now, or yes, I'm a, VP of whatever. And it's I think the tough part is you have to understand how to apply your skills,
Mhm.
because just throwing out everything you've spent decades working on is a waste of energy. Also, you're not, I don't care how old you are, it's harder to learn new skills anytime after the age of 19 or something. So just learning new skills straight up isn't necessarily always the right answer. But if you can apply, like I was saying earlier, like how do you develop great relationships with people? You be curious, you ask them things, you find out what their goals, dreams, needs are. You all know how to do that. So the trick is to figure out how to adapt your IC superpowers towards being a great leader. But you can't just do what you've been doing. You will fail miserably. I'll just put that out there.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. I think one of the points you mentioned on, which is really important, is that self-awareness piece, and the leader having the self-awareness that they have that relationship, that the team feel that trust, they feel that
Yep.
they can speak up. And Bernadette asked a really good question. So for prospective leaders, do you have any tips on maintaining enough self-awareness to spot when you might be starting to fall into one of those patterns that we've been talking about. So they may have started off strong, but how do you maintain that self-awareness to make sure you don't fall back into it? Because I've seen that happen as well.
Yeah, that's a great question as well. And so I think self-awareness is helpful on one level if things are not feeling good, to be constantly checking in with yourself, or with if your manager is a great coach, or if you're working with a coach, to be constantly checking in with how you're doing and why things aren't feeling right with your team. And so that's one level, because if you're constantly saying everyone hates me, like, that's not going to work. You're not going to be as successful at your job from there. So checking in on what's happening with your body. I talk about this in the book as well. I also I have my entire toolkit that I use with my clients is on my website. It's completely free. Don't even have to give me your email address, but I recommend signing up for my newsletter that I occasionally send out, not very frequently. You have the option to do that, but it's all free. So I have what I call a reaction tracker, which is a tool for you to track at any given moment, anything that's happening with you, how you're feeling in your body, your heart, your emotions, and to track your thoughts, your head, because often we live in our thoughts, especially technical folks. And we often don't know how we're feeling about something. Really, like anger comes up a lot, but often there's fear behind that, and we just don't realize it. So constantly be checking in with yourself on the one hand. On the other hand, and there's a chapter about this in the book as well, constantly, like you would do with your customers, constantly be checking in with your team, with your key stakeholders, anyone who matters to you. And I recommend a core trusted group of 5 to 8 people who you're always going to be able to come back with, as well as if you have a manager, your boss, they should be doing this with you. If you are senior leader, you should be doing this with your team. Constantly be checking in with how you're doing, because you only know so much. You know what you feel, you know what you think, and you know what's in your heart, but you don't know how people are really reacting towards you, engaging with you, or the impact you're really having on people. And I recommend every 6 months to be checking in with folks to see what impact you're having on them, and with your team every week or every other week, however often you do 360s constantly. It's essential. So yeah, you don't know what you don't know. And it's just, again, it's all like product. Like, you don't build products in a vacuum. Plenty of companies do. It's not the most successful way to do it. You'd be ultimately more successful if you get the hell out of the building and find out how you're really doing.
Yeah.
So 2 parts to awareness, very important.
Awesome. And I think that's very sage advice to leave us for the last question. We're almost on time, but Donna, thank you so much for joining and having this conversation. I learned a lot.
Thank you, Adam.
We had a ton of really great questions. And I think for folks on the call, it's the leader's journey. Make sure you check it out. We will be giving about 25 copies out as well. I just dropped a message in the Zoom chat for you to join our Slack community as well, so we can help communicate and speak with you about handing some of those books out. But yeah, thanks for joining us, Donna. I hope you enjoyed that.
This was great, Adam. So awesome, and great questions. I always love hanging out with other product folks. You're all doing great work, and I'm excited to see what you'll accomplish over time.
Yeah, well, you're helping us. Like this, the tips and toolkits are awesome. Like, there's not many books you read where you really truly self-reflect, and I'm like, right, I'm going to actually try this and try and make a difference. So I would definitely recommend folks to take a look at it.
I love it. This is great.
Awesome. All right. And just to wrap up for everyone, so thank you all from Productboard and our product makers community. We're going to be sending out a post-event survey. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the session. Getting heaps of really great feedback in the chat at the moment as well. Thanking everyone for joining. And let's keep the conversation going. So we always kind of talk about different product conversations, challenges over in our product community. So feel free to join us in Slack. And if you want to speak, or you want to recommend a speaker or somebody you'd love for us to have, you can learn more at productmakers.com. We have a ton of interesting stuff coming up. Donna, you might even want to listen in on some of these. We've got a number of guest speakers coming up. We've got a roundtable tomorrow, which is like a lean coffee product makers type event. So lots of things coming up, which you can learn more about in our community. And yeah, just want to say thanks from our product makers community. And thank you, Donna, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Thanks. See you, everyone. Thank you.